Hi everyone, a really super warm welcome to the second Chef's Chat in a series of 3 sessions hosted by the Chef's Manifesto at this year's AGRF 2021. My name's Paul Newnham. I'm the director of the SDG2 Advocacy Hub and help facilitate the Chef's Manifesto alongside my team around the world. I'm so excited to be able to join today this conversation live from Nairobi, Kenya, and from the AGRF studio here. Before I turn to the 2 chefs who are joining me today, let me just say a few sentences about the Chef's Manifesto for those that haven't come across this network and who didn't attend the conversation on Tuesday. We're going to be joined shortly by Chef Ali and Chef Zoe, and I'm super excited to get into a conversation with them. The Chef's Manifesto is a chef-led network that brings together 1,000+ chefs from 90 countries to help deliver a sustainable food system. We have 1 in 3 people malnourished globally, and our food production system can be quite damaging to our environment. And so we want to bring chefs, farmers, policy makers, and world leaders together to really deliver a sustainable and nutritious, delicious food future. And chefs are key. And we heard this from Chef Kieran and Chef Scar in the first chat. Chefs sit between the farm and the fork. And the framework for the manifesto is tied to the Sustainable Development Goals, and it's creating practical actions that chefs can take, such as things like protecting biodiversity, investing in livelihoods, celebrating local and seasonal food, reducing waste, and ensuring food. Discovered his love of cooking early, and his aim is to inspire, educate people about new trends in the culinary world through his career. He's both worked nationally and internationally to champion Kenyan cuisine. He's also been a big part of IFAD's Recipe of Change campaign, a program which really has chefs highlight to new climate impacts to protect their food security. So great to have you with us, Ali. We'll jump into a conversation in a minute. Do you want to say hi?
Hi everyone, it's good to be here. It's definitely such a pleasure, and Paul, it's good to see you.
Good to see you
Let's
too.
do this.
Absolutely. And then we've got Chef Zoe, who is a writer and chef from London. She is born to a Ghanaian father and Irish mother. Zoe deepened her understanding of West African cuisine after a trip to visit her extended family in Ghana. And Zoe has since become a leading voice for Ghanaian cuisine in London. She has a pop-up restaurant and supper club which brings traditional and contemporary Ghanaian food to an audience outside the Ghanaian community. Chef Zoe is an author of the amazing book called Zoe's Ghana Kitchen, and we're delighted to have you with us today, Chef.
Hello, I hope you can hear me. Thank you for having me, yes.
Absolutely. No, it's great to see you and great to have you with us as well. So we're going to jump straight in. We've got a couple of quick questions that we're going to kind of get started. So the AGRF is focused this year around really connecting around food systems, and we have the Food System Summit happening in just over 2 weeks in New York City. So it's all about food system transformation this year, and we're also then going to be looking at COP26, Nutrition for Growth. These are big events that are happening where the world's going to be gathering. So one of the questions I like to sort of start with is, what do you guys think is the view of the role of chefs in transforming our food system? Like, why is it important to get chefs involved in these kinds of conversations? Often chefs are at these events, but they're not necessarily in the conversation. So maybe Zoe, do you want to launch out first? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, as you said, we sit between the field and the fork, and I think that we as chefs have a responsibility to be doing a number of things. Actually, we need to be talking to our diners about that process from still to fork and encouraging people to be informed or to understand what sustainability looks like in the value chain, the supply chain. I think, part of what I do through my online spice shop and the whole conversation I have around decolonising the food industry is to encourage people to have closer, more direct relationships with the things they're consuming.
Yeah.
And so, for example, when it comes to West African ingredients, it's like I want people to be buying black or buying African, cut out some of the things in the middle. But as chefs, we have a responsibility to be cooking sustainably through seasonal ingredients as locally as we can, and educating, our audience, our consumers, whoever they might be, about all of these various sort of the intersections that sit around putting a plate of food together on the table. And that doesn't just include like biodiversity and agriculture and transparent supply chains. It's also about, who are the people selling you this food? What's their motivation? Is everybody in that value chain benefiting from the ingredients being served? And just being more conscious, creating more conscious diners.
Yeah.
And also talking to our suppliers in the same kind of way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that, you've just really talked about so many elements of the food system, which is so critical. Like, this is where chefs are, not only thinking about the ingredients, where they come from, the livelihoods, what that does in terms of even power dynamics and all kinds of other elements, but then also thinking about the heritage, and then also the diner. How do you educate them? So many elements there. We're going to continue to dig in. Ali, anything to add just around the chef's role in transforming our food system? What would you like to add?
Well, I think what Zoe just said is basically amazing. That's basically what I would say. It's very important for a chef to get into that farm and be able to see how this produce has been done. Because at the end of the day, it comes to the kitchen and we're the one working with this product. So again, it's very important, and that's what I do whenever I get the time. I definitely go from the farm to the market and then see how all these products are being treated at the end of the day, because they need to be treated sustainably for people to be able to get good livelihood. So at the end of the day, I think Zoe just explained it further, which is basically amazing. So we need to get into the farm. We need to know how these ingredients are being brought up. That's the only way we can be able to make a better world for everybody.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I know Chef Ali, if you follow Chef Ali, you will see on his platform, he's often in the market in Mombasa, has a lot of friends there, and but then also goes beyond that into the farm, and really talks to people who are the growers, and really tries to engage and tell that story of where does that food come from. So I think that's really key. So let's continue. This year's Africa Green Revolution Forum talks about pathways on how to steer the continent towards good food that's accessible, affordable and nutritious, and that doesn't negatively impact the environment and can create sort of a shared prosperity for Africa. Chef Zoe, as a writer, chef advocate, you've been very active in bringing African food to the masses and in conversations around how to move forward these ingredients and cuisines from the continent. And how do you profile the story around African food? Can you just talk to us a little bit about this journey? How does it play into a wider narrative of food around the world?
I think I caught all of that, so forgive me. I'm going to try and answer. I think, look, I started Zoe's Ghana Kitchen 12 years ago at a time in the UK when there wasn't very many people cooking West African food. So the narrative for me was very much about introducing these amazing flavours and ingredients, because I couldn't understand why people weren't more familiar with the cuisine. When you think of how large the continent is, think of how many countries are in the continent, it became very apparent very quickly to me that there just wasn't enough representation around that food. The cookbook came out and everything, got some nice buzz about that. But what I've realised subsequent to that was, I've been singing this song of Ghana and its ingredients for such a long time. And then I realised through conversations with my suppliers on the ground, who export to me, that they were really struggling to find basic things like grains of paradise and millet. And, even when I was last in Accra in 2018, before the pandemic, I was struggling in markets to find locally produced indigenous ingredients. And talking to chefs on the ground there, I realised that there's a problem with big multinationals coming in. And so, on one side of it, it's like I have a voice to sing the song of this thing, but I was being very naive because I was assuming that I would be bringing wealth back to Africa, Ghanaian, West African exporters. But actually what's been happening in the last 15 years is that big white corporate business, Unilever, Monsanto, whoever else it is, have been buying up all of the land predominantly, and sort of marginalising those smallholders, those co-ops and farms. So I've made it my business now to deal directly with smallholders and farms and have that conversation directly, so that I know, that people are getting paid in the system and that I'm supporting livelihoods. And that's a conversation I want to extend across Africa, really. It's like, it's for so long the continent has had, even colonialism, everything else, but especially in the last 100 years, we're seeing it again, this kind of third wave colonialism where people are coming into Africa, taking what's good, repackaging it and selling it to a white Western audience, and there's no care for the sustainability of the agriculture that's being left behind, So my conversation has changed into biodiversity, encouraging those farmers to grow different things, introducing, and for Ghana in particular, in order for the foodways there to thrive, we also have to evolve a little bit, right? We have to tell people about these ingredients, and the recipes have to come out, but also they have to develop to encourage people to want to use the ingredients, because there's also been this kind of disparity between the new middle class in Ghana kind of almost turning their nose up to traditional foodways and things like that because they're looking to the West as this symbol of aspirational, eating or dining. So there has to be balance, obviously, in all the ecosystems around this conversation, and with globalization, modernization, urbanization, all of those things affect indigenous foodways, and we need to be able to balance all of those parts. And, over 500 years or more, actually, because from pre-slavery, Africans were doing trade deals in the Americas. It's a bit of a misnomer that people think all those ingredients went over just with the slave trade, but the influence of African ingredients across the globe is tremendous, and whether it was to do with our early trading or whether it's a consequence of slavery and colonialism and things like that, the truth is Africa is the heart of the world's larder, grain store.
No,
and continuing that conversation is essential, really, but also ensuring that we get Africans in love with their own ingredients and food, and that they're eating sustainably, that they're eating locally, and that there is love and respect for each country's own cuisines. So that's really where I think my conversation is going in the next 10 years. It's telling people more about not just the supply chain issues and the sustainability issues, but encouraging these small co-ops and farmers to grow other crops that have been less valued or less sought after, but are delicious and wonderful, and teaching people about the ways they can cook them and eat them and how they can purchase them in a sustainable way.
Absolutely.
I hope that answers the question.
No, it does. And I think you've raised a number of really critical points. I mean, the other day when we were talking with Kieran and Scar, one of the things that came up was, even training of chefs. That the majority of training in even Kenya was all around French cuisine. It's all about thinking about, different styles. And this all goes back into perception. It goes back into value. It goes back into storytelling. And I think this is where the chef can play such a key role alongside the farmers, alongside the agriculture, the development, the technology, to really create that value where people appreciate and they see the value. And that's essentially why the French did it many years ago. Italians, other countries have done this, where and that's dominated the culinary world for so long. But now I think there's a huge renaissance of saying, how do we rediscover the biodiversity, the ingredients, the foods that make more sense to grow, that are more nutritious, that actually have amazing flavor and make sense in those spaces. So I think you've touched on an amazing part of the conversation here around food system transformation. Let me bring Chef Ali. Let me bring you in. We are getting some questions in as well. So if you do have some questions, hopefully we'll have a bit of time for that. So feel free to do it. I see Ralph, you've got a question there about insects in food, and so we'll come to that in a minute. But I'm going to say, Chef Ali, just bringing you in. Obviously, building on what Zoe said, you've been involved for a number of years in kind of this kind of advocacy, really showcasing local cuisine. And doing a lot of that through Chef's Manifesto and really thinking about some of these issues. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about your work and why you think particularly and how you've kind of engaged in this kind of food system transformation in your space?
Great. So for me, what I would say is that every chef needs to get the knowledge of the food system at the end of the day, because we're talking about how important is the food system. And the thing is, you need to understand the components of the food system. Like I personally have been lucky to travel, thanks to IFAD and again Chef's Manifesto, to go and learn a lot about climate change and what farmers do face every single day whenever they bring up their crops and definitely the ingredients that we do use in the kitchen every single day. I would say I've been lucky, but at the end of the day, wherever you are, what I would say is that it's very important for a chef to be able to understand the four components of a food system, which is basically pretty simple: the production, the processing, distribution, and consumption. So how it normally works is basically what really matters as starters is the production. How is this ingredient being brought up? Is it being brought up sustainably at the end of the day? Because it starts from the farm and eventually goes to the consumer, which at the end of the day is the kitchen where we normally make. So the second one would definitely be the processing. Other products being processed well. Climate change is the biggest impact right now, definitely, as we say, in Africa as well. A lot of farmers do face a lot of challenges with climate change, so they definitely need a lot of support, and that's when IFAD is there to basically support as much as they can and invest in the rural people, which is something that I really appreciate. But to get to learn more of this, you need to go to the farm and be able to understand what they go through. So the processing is basically also very important, which is the second component of basically the food system. And then now we go to the distribution part. It needs labor, energy at the end of the day. And again, while the crops are being distributed, or the vegetable or the ingredients are being distributed, is there any wastage going on? So this is something that we also need to look at and see, so that we can be able to reduce wastage, because at the end of the day, we advocate for zero waste, and this also could happen at this point before it gets to the fourth component, which is basically the consumption. And the consumption is how people receive it. Like, as the chefs, I will receive this product, but if it wasn't treated well, so this means this product wouldn't be very good for human consumption at the end of the day. If it wasn't been brought up sustainably, this means it wouldn't be good for human consumption. So at the end of the day, it's important for chefs to be able to understand all this, so that you know what you receive is basically wholesome, at the end of the day, sustainable, and again, very local, because that's basically the most important thing that you want to do at the moment, because you want to deal with locally produced ingredients which are indigenous. And again, as just Zoe said, at the end of the day, we focus on what we have. Like right now in Kenya, maize is scarce, but we do have sorghum. But unfortunately, not everybody consumes the sorghum, because farmers in the country probably feel like sorghum is an ingredient that sells well internationally. So people do make money out of it at the end of the day, but then it's something that you can make and enjoy with the family, and it's going to be as nutritious as the cornmeal, which is the ugali. This is a national dish, but again, the ugali, which is the cornmeal, is scarce right now, and in the future we might not be able to have enough for everybody. So sorghum is available, it's sustainable, and it's something that doesn't need a lot of water to bring up, and it's delicious at the end of the day, also nutritious. And I've managed to come up with a lot of recipes with sorghum just to make it fun again, and at the end of the day, to bring it back into the market as much as I can say. And other than that, I think it's important to focus on what we have locally, and see how we can be able to showcase it all over to the world and see how we can make a difference on the same.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Chef Ali. And I think, as you mentioned there, sometimes these ingredients, it's about how you showcase them. And different ingredients use less water, they have better environmental or nutritional impacts. I know, Zoe, you also talked about different ingredients that, you were struggling to get access to. I think this is an interesting space where, when we're looking at these kinds of ingredients, the role of chefs. So do you think this is an important thing chefs can do, is do this substitution, help to seed new ingredients and get them out? I know lots of chefs that have done this, but either of you, Zoe, Ali, what's your take on getting these ingredients out there?
You mean, sorry, Paul, just for clarity, do you mean the indigenous ingredients in the indigenous place, or do you mean?
Well, I think there's both. So, yeah. So I think there's a bit of both. I mean, sometimes there's like ingredients which can then create market for smallholder farmers, as you talked about, out of Africa. But then there's also the question of, sometimes I hear that people are growing things and they don't eat them. They won't eat them. They'll sell them and buy something that costs more that's actually not as good for them, or something like that. So I think there's two roles there. It's almost creating value in different crops that are indigenous or that are better for the planet and people.
Yeah, I'm going to bring in another, it's like associated topic maybe, but this is
go for it.
Because Ali has done a beautiful job of describing all the ways in which he cooks sorghum, right? And that's what we need. We need more of that. And this is why representation matters. And this is why even food writing and recipe writing and cookbooks play a really important role here, because it's part of the education that we can do as people who cook and people who care about food, is to inform, right? And the more knowledge people have, and also to, honestly, if people see people talking about sorghum all over Instagram, if people see people talking about millet all over Instagram, people are going to want to engage with that. It's going to bring that value, right? It's almost this thing of, it goes back to you can't be what you can't see, in a way. But if people don't know about an ingredient or what to do with it or how to cook it or how delicious it can be, then of course they're not going to use it. So so all of these things, I write a column for Today's Show about West African ingredients specifically for that purpose, because I want to tell people what are the health benefits, what are the traditional uses, how is it grown, how can you incorporate this into your diet. And it's slow work, but it is part of the necessary work, at the same time as going hand in hand with innovating cuisine, right? So we talk now about modern African gastronomy or modern African cooking, because that's what so many of us are doing in order to profile these ingredients and flavors, not just to an audience in the diaspora or on the continent itself, but to a wider audience, to bring up that value again, which sadly, it shouldn't be that we need to, when I say we, I'm referring to Africans, by the way. It shouldn't be that we need to look to the West constantly as some kind of aspirational value point, but that is where we are. So we need to meet people where they are, right? So if you can create fine dining restaurants using African ingredients, then let's do it. Let's showcase those ingredients. But also, there's plenty of space for the home cook and for the, if you can innovate, even in minor, slightly ways, with recipes and how they're presented, and talk about the health benefits of those ingredients and why people should be cooking those things at home. It all helps. So, like I said, this is like really an intersectional conversation. And for chefs who write and chefs who don't write, there's still a conversation in the plate of food, whether it's, And
I think this is what you're saying, Zoe, is amazing, because there's so many different people think about chefs just as in the kitchen, but now there's chefs like you're writing, Ali's on TV, different people have different platforms, and these platforms create power. And the power, you can pick up like an ingredient, you pick up a pepper and you look at it, and the person who grew this, they'll go, well, this looks a beautiful pepper, and you go, yeah, that looks attractive. But then what a chef does is they take that and they turn that into a dish that then you can eat. And so it just adds value. It's adding value to the work that's been done by the farmer. And so you end up with this layers being added, and these layers add a conversation, and they add the ability for people to think more, to understand. And then if you're thinking about climate and nutrition and you're informed, then as chefs you can also guide people towards changing their habits. You could guide them to eat bad things, or you can guide them to eat good things for that space. And so, Ali, when you think about that, how important has this sort of access to science been helping you to think about that? You know, you've been involved in some of these conversations, and you've been able to talk with researchers and scientists, and you know, obviously thought a lot about that. How's that been helpful for you?
In terms of understanding better the ingredients, is that what you mean?
Yeah, exactly. And challenging your thinking about cooking and everything, you know.
Well, I don't think I've gotten the question really well. So,
so
just speaking about this.
I mean, like,
aspect of the.
Yeah, so we've been traveling together, and I know we've had these conversations where we've talked about eating differently, eating different environments, thinking about that. And you've then gone, well, what does that look like in Kenya? What does that look like in our space, in the market, in the ingredients? You know, you've thought about, you know, plant-based dishes and substitutes from climate change and all this kind of thing.
Yeah, what I would say is that where I am right now is a bit, people are really into what they know at the end of the day. So as I just spoke about the ugali, people feel like if they won't eat ugali, this means they won't be able to get, you know, nutritious at the end of the day, because it is our local national dish at the end of the day. But as I said, however, ugali right now is a little bit of a problem. People might not know, because we go deeper into this and be able to understand, because we hear this from the World Food Program, that they do get problems to get the maize right now so they can be able to make ugali and be able to feed everybody. So experimenting has been a little bit of a problem right now, especially in the country, because people are stuck to what they know. So people want to eat the greens, which is basically sukuma wiki and ugali, and a little bit of a protein, which would probably be like, you know, a meat dish. But at the end of the day, it is very important right now for people to also transform and get a little bit more creative into what they eat and balance that meals in a different way. Like we just spoke about sorghum, and people need to understand sorghum is readily available in the country. At the end of the day, it's even more nutritious than the ugali, and you can make a lovely dish out of it. Like I made something with the green grams and sorghum that was in Kitui. We had a project with IFAD. I got to understand what problems the farmers have and what they can bring up, and they were able to bring lots of sorghum and the green gram, and we made a dish out of that together, and we had it together, which was just amazing. That was recipes of change. But again, you'll still get questions like, this is not our staple. How nutritious is this? So I think more of educating the people would definitely be something really good. And again, we can use our platforms to advocate on the same and talk about these indigenous ingredients and how healthy it is and how important it is for people to be able to use every single day. We do have the platforms to write for the newspapers. We do have recipes that we do share online every single day. But again, change is something that's a little bit difficult for everybody to adapt at the moment.
At the moment, yeah, absolutely, Ali. So thank you guys. Like we're going to wrap up, but really appreciate this. Obviously, both of you have significant platforms online as well, with your different on the different channels, Instagram and everything. If I would encourage all our viewers to follow both Chef Ali and Zoe to just track how they're telling these stories. Have a look at the dishes that they're creating. Have a look at the ingredients they're showcasing and support that. But also try it out, and also try out some of these recipes yourself. So any final words before we just wrap? Zoe, over to you.
Yeah, I'll try and keep this brief, but I don't know that I would suggest that this is a responsibility of chefs, but I think they should be mindful of this as well. Like when you have an ingredient, and I'm going to use the example of okra, because okra is widely used across Africa and across, Southeast Asia and Asia. But, in Northern Europe and say Western Hemisphere, it's not so much necessarily loved. But I spent a couple of weeks on a farm in Asheville. Chris Smith, who wrote the whole okra cookbook,
learning about okra, because there are hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of varieties. And like, I found out beautiful new information, things like all the other extrapolations from that ingredient, right? So okra oil, okra sugar, the perfume from okra that can be collected, the fibers from okra that can be used for making things and building things. So I think that's another benefit of chefs being able to get into the farm and talk to farmers who not all farmers are necessarily concerned with just producing something that's for being edible, you know, because a lot of, especially African ingredients, there's a lot of extra extrapolations, even moringa oil, all of the different things that can come out of that. So just wanted to add on that let's all be mindful as well about extending the life of the ingredient beyond the plate, because yes, we have beautiful edible ingredients, but also some of these ingredients are super materials, you know, that could be the future of sustainability in other areas beyond food. So just wanted to...
No, this is super, and I think, Zoe, I mean, we could talk all day, because like this is about food exploring. It's like about exploring food and understanding all the elements, and so I'm super grateful for you to make the time. Chef Ali, thank you so much. Any final words, Chef Ali?
I think it's amazing. I really appreciate this opportunity. You guys are awesome. And thanks to Chef's Manifesto, we were able to do this. Thank you so much. And again, let's not forget about zero waste. And let's see what we can do with the ingredients. Even if after the ingredients have already reached the vendor at the end of the day, we need to ask ourselves, what does the vendor do to the vegetables if they're not sold? So we need to look into that and see how we can also to make something out of it and also prevent zero waste, which is something I'm currently working on with an organization to see how we can be able to prolong the lifespan of probably a vegetable like okra, as Zoe just said, and it's just going to be a lovely crisp, which is delicious, healthy and sustainable.
Awesome.
That's more of it.
Love it.
It's been amazing.
Thanks, Ali. Well, thank you all for joining. Thank you to our audience online. Thanks especially to Chefs Zoe and Ali for your time and great insights and stories. If you're interested in finding out more about the Chef's Manifesto, or you're a chef and keen to join, feel free to check out our website at chefsmanifesto.com, or to follow our social channels of Chef's Manifesto. You'll see lots of chefs that are sharing just different elements of the story around food systems. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, we're going to be back for one last Chef's Chat tomorrow at the same time, 1 p.m. East Africa time, with another two awesome chefs sharing how they'll drive change towards good food for all in their kitchens and communities. So thank you everyone for joining the Chef's Chat at AGRF 2021.
Oh, oh.